It's me, your boy Ryan Swag, right? So, IVs, PvP, Pokemon Go. It's a question I get often enough that I felt that I wanted to make a video on it, do a live stream on it to kind of settle the word for everyone, because I get this question all the time from people asking, Ryan Swag, I got like a 14, 12, 8, and I got a 10, 14, 7. Which one's the better IV? They both turn out to be 1500 CP. Which one's the better CP? Which one's the better IV? And the base answer I can give you guys for PvP in the Great League and in the Ultra League is that the IVs really don't matter. Whatever IV spread gets you closest to the cap, being 1500 or 2500, whatever gets you closest to that is very likely going to be your best IV spread. That's the base concept that I have found. I tried doing some max mining simulations, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, in this matchup having a higher attack IV matters, but then I'd realize that your opponent's defense IV could very easily be higher, and if it's higher, well then you lose the advantage from that. This isn't the case in PvE content. So you'll see this graph here. This is a graph of the Cresselia raid boss. It's not our current raid boss, but it's the raid boss graph I actually have finished. And you'll see that I have these breakpoints and bulk points highlighted, like these levels of significance in the Cresselia raid. And the reason why we can do this and measure this is because Cresselia's stats are known. A raid boss will always have the same HP, defense, and attack stat as it always will. Every single Cresselia, same stats. Of course, the movesets change, but the stats stay the same. And therefore, we can find what levels of significance exist in that raid. When our attack stat will get to the point where it can do 1 extra damage, and when it can do 1 extra damage, well then that's like a huge upgrade for some Pokemon in the raid fight. And that's why we measure what these breakpoints are, because not everybody has the resources to power up their Pokemon all the way to level 4. So you might be thinking, Ryan Swag, why can't we do the same thing in PvP? And we can, right? But the thing is that not all of our opponents are going to have known stats. Just as easily as you can max min your attack, your opponent can max min their defense. And then on top of that, we don't know what's going to be coming at us. So if you end up max minning your attack by lowering your defense, well then you could open yourself up for your opponents to hit attack breakpoints on you because you got a lower defense now. So you might solve some problems that way, but you could open up more problems by doing it too. So it's not 100% clear what the most optimal IV spreads are going to be for each individual species, because in short, we don't know what the optimal IV spreads are going to be for our opponents. And because of that, I don't think it's really worth worrying about what your IV spread is. The only thing you should really be focusing on is how close you can get to 1500 or 2500 without going over. So there are some matchups where knowing your IV spread could matter, because your opponents will have static stats, or they'll have static or less stats. And these are Pokemon that have a cap that happens before the cap. Like they'll be at their max level, max CP, before reaching 1500 or 2500, depending on the league. So in the Great League, that's almost exclusively Medicham. Medicham caps before getting to 1500, which means that the most perfect Medicham will always be a perfect 100% Hundo Medicham at level 40. And therefore, if you were to max min your IVs specifically for that matchup, so you're either doing 1 more damage to it or taking 1 less damage from its counter damage, then that could improve your Medicham matchup. But that only works for Medicham in the Great League because its cap is before the cap. And the reason why that works is because it will have those static stats that you can play around and be aware of. Similarly, if you're stuck between 2 Pokemon that have like a close matchup with Medicham, if you were to run simulations on them using Go Battle Sim, Poke Battler, or PvPoke, whichever simulator you're most comfortable with for this, then you could see which one is having a better matchup against Medicham compared to the other one, and then that would most likely be your best IV spread. Just be aware that by manipulating your IVs like this, you could open yourself up to other vulnerabilities, but of course those vulnerabilities aren't 100% known. You could easily not be opening yourself up for problems. But if you are beating the Medicham and your goal is to beat the Medicham with these optimal IVs, then that works out. In the Great League, 3 Pokemon I identified that you could do this with are Steelix, Meganium, and Blastoise. I don't know how big of a threat Blastoise or Meganium are in the Ultra League, but Steelix is a pretty decent threat. So being aware of how you can play around a perfect Steelix could work in your favor, especially if you're using like a Giratina or something like that. And Giratina also opens up an interesting idea for looking at PvP IVs in the future, something that we're not exactly doing now. If you look at Giratina in the Ultra League, I'd say 95% plus Giratinas you end up facing in the Ultra League are going to have a 10-10-10 IV spread to a 15-15-15 IV spread. Therefore, there is a reasonable, measurable range of attack and defense that you could try to hit breakpoints on with your other Pokemon's IVs and levels. So in the future, figuring out that range and which Pokemon can take advantage of that range and stats could help out in the Giratina matchup. And since Giratina and Steelix are 2 Pokemon that are kind of important to be aware of for the Ultra League, being aware of these stats and how your IVs play into that matchup or both matchups could help you, I guess, take advantage of opponents using those Pokemon. So that is stuff in the future or stuff that you could work on right now to figure out how to get the best IVs. But for almost everything else, or Pokemon that are 100% losing to those Pokemon or already 100% winning against those Pokemon, I'd say what IV spread you go with is a lot more nebulous because it's not measurable if it's going to result in more victories or more losses for you. Now, of course, that's not a very satisfactory answer. I imagine there's a lot of people out there that are like, Ryan Swag, but I got these 2 Pokemon, and one's got a high attack, and one's got a high defense, and one's got something else going on, and I need to know which one to power up. Ryan Swag, I need to know. They both get to 1500 CP. Which one's better? Well, I'd say a base idea, like a base heuristic that you could go off of, is to almost always side with the low attack IV Pokemon, because you will very likely get more out of the defense and the HP stats because they weigh less for CP. So therefore, you could get more stats total off of that. And even though it's not 100% clear if those more stats will help you or not, what is clear is that you'll have more stats, which suggests that in most situations that will help you out. A situation where you'd want to go with a high attack IV Pokemon would probably be a Pokemon that has a high base power fast move. So if you go with the PvP fast moves and you sort by power, attacks that have a high base power are going to receive a better presumed benefit from having a high attack IV because it's easier for high base power attacks to hit breakpoints. So this is just a suggestion. It's not 100% measurable if you will be hitting a new breakpoint by maxing your attack for your Pokemon. But what this does suggest is that you very likely will get that benefit. And that benefit is even more so for high base power moves that have a low duration. So looking at moves like Razor Leaf and Rock Throw, I know that Bite and Dragon Breath and Counter also kind of fall into this category. So it's the higher base power moves with the low duration. You'll be getting more hits in, which means if you are hitting that breakpoint to get 1 extra damage, well then you'll more frequently get that more extra damage in. Now you might be thinking, Ryan Swag, 1 extra damage, that's not that big of a deal. But if you think about it, most Pokemon are getting like 10 to 20 fast moves in per fight. So that's 10 to 20 extra damage you could be dealing to a Pokemon. So that does add up. And if you are losing a specific matchup by only 10 HP, well then obviously hitting that breakpoint could tip the scales. But in doing so, you could lower your defense IV so much that you open up a breakpoint for your opponent to take advantage of. And then, yes, you are getting that 1 extra damage, but now they're also getting that 1 extra damage. So the benefit you're trying to get now turns into like not a benefit, right? So that is not 100% clear. And that's the base idea of this video is, we don't 100% know how much max mining your IVs for PvP is going to benefit you. And yeah, but against Medicham and other Pokemon that cap before the cap, paying attention to those matchups and how your IVs play into those matchups, that can help you. So something I didn't cover is, let's say you got like a 5-5-5 and a 15-15-15, and they both hit 1500 CP, so which one's better, Ryan Swag? And I'd say they're basically the same. There might be like a slight difference in the stats based off of how the multiplier works. But if it's like 0, 0, 0 versus 15, 15, 15, as long as they're hitting the same CP cap, like they're both 1500 when you power them up, then they're effectively the same, in my opinion. There are like slight differences. I don't think they're really worth worrying about. So that's my thoughts on that. I don't know, 90% plus of the population, just going with whatever you have to power up as close as you can to 1500 or 2500, that's going to be your best bet. But of course, if you want to go a little bit deeper, Metacham and Steelix are like static matchups that you can, prepare your Pokemon better for. So run simulations on them and see what the best attack and defense IVs would be for your Pokemon for that specific matchup. Yeah. But for everything else that doesn't cap before the cap, they have like just wide ranges of stats that you can't 100%, predict, because you could be up against anything, right? And yeah, all it takes is them to have one number different than what you expected them to have to turn the matchup. And right now, there really isn't much agency we can put into our IV spreads. Most people are probably going to be like me, and they're just going to power up whatever they have that gets closest. And so if people are doing that, well, then you don't really know what's coming at you in a meta sense. That was a clip from my live stream SwagTips. SwagTips streams every Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time on the Twitch channel SwagTips. If you got any questions on this content, comment below, let me know what's up, and comment below and let me know if you want any Boulder League tournaments. And subscribe. Do that too. SwagTips. And that's the base idea with that.